Hello everybody, it is General Blue here once again. I took a bit of a long hiatus since SmashCon, largely because I've been kind of fatigued and just trying to deal with nonsense from work. More so because I knew I had to speed this chapter up and redo the commentary in a way that made a decent amount of sense and just didn't drag on for eternity. This, to me, is probably one of the worst chapters in the game, and also one of the hardest. So, you're constantly blitzed by a bunch of enemies that have the ability to fuse and heal, and they will do this in rapid succession. And on top of that, you only have 4 marshals here. You have Kaiba, Pegasus, Mokuba, and I believe you get to choose the last one. It's probably going to end up being Bones, just because that's who you've had for most of the campaign up until this point. That's it. Pretty much got nothing left after this. Now, here, since I did Yugi's campaign first, and I actually have an abundance of items, it seems pretty easy right now. And, yeah, I'm getting through it okay, but, both enemies that confuse have polymerization. It's not like in earlier chapters where you only had to worry about one. And this is something that's going to continue being a pain in the behind, because, like I mentioned in previous chapters, when an enemy is able to fuse, not only does that eliminate all damage taken upon them, not only does that eliminate all status afflictions upon them, not only does that renew all of their turn activations, so if they use it at the end of the fight, they basically have an entire free fight to just wail on you while you can't do literally anything, but they also have status guards, so even if they do fuse at the beginning of the fight, you have very little chance of whittling them down and doing anything to combat them. So you're going to be continually fighting the Crimson Sunbird, or whatever it's called, and Chimera. Now, it's not too difficult to just bait them out. As you saw earlier, I was able to set up Gift of the Mystical Elf to heal very quickly, and I was also able to set up a barricade so that my monsters have a better inherent attack stat while inside this base. That's not necessarily the issue. The issue is that you are bombarded so quickly, you have very little time to react. And in the context of a normal playthrough, it's not necessarily terrible if you take these actions, because you will have time to recuperate and recoup your losses. The bigger issue is simply that you don't really have time to optimize your team or fake people out in the middle of this whole operation. So, you notice that there was very little time between when the first team struck me and this team right now that I'm fighting. The main problem with that is you also can't really put up a cannon to defend yourself, and even if you could do that, number one, they would probably fuse as soon as the fight begins, since they're only at about 25% health, and even if they didn't somehow, that would only really save you for one monster team, and there's a bunch of monster teams here in rapid succession. It's also worth noting that it's very close to nightfall in this mission, but it isn't. This is one of the few missions where I'd say it actually counts as a night mission, except not when it matters. See, if it was a night mission from the very beginning, you could at least gain the buff of Bones' team being strong enough to gain a power-type bonus and deal with whatever nonsense is going on. That just doesn't happen, you know? So if you pick Kaiba's campaign first, welcome to the wall, because look at that. Look at how fast that was. That was less than 5 seconds. Sure, this footage is going at double speed, but that was less than 5 seconds. Now, again, if you pick Yugi's campaign first, this isn't necessarily a huge issue, because, I'm able to recover pretty effectively with what I'm doing now. I haven't had to tag out the teams, and it looks like my current team is at basically full health. That is pivotal to making sure that I don't botch this challenge up, because if I lose these monsters, I mean, it's not going to be the end of the challenge, necessarily, but there's some reasonable powerhouses, so I consider myself lucky whenever they dodge attacks like this. But the problem is, if you do end up losing monsters like this, then there's not a whole lot you can effectively do to recuperate. Okay? Let's just say that you're doing this in a normal playthrough, not the Necrovalley challenge like I'm doing here. If you already lost a team by this point, you're fighting at such a huge deficit, and you won't really be able to have them regenerate and come back to life for a significant amount of in-game hours, which you simply do not have. These enemies are blitzing you back and forth with really no room to breathe, no room to even tag out your teams. I put this team in point at the very beginning of the mission because I felt that they were best equipped to handle the monsters due to the sheer, not just the strength of the curry box, but the sheer number of attacks that the Gentleman and Dragon Zombie have available. If I had not done that, it would be significantly harder. Right now, though, it's fairly easy. It's just a simple routine of try and take out the healer first, because the fusing monsters aren't actually going to fuse unless they're at very low HP or they're almost out of attack slots, and then try to just pick off the weakest one. Sometimes you'll get lucky, and you'll get a critical like I did a few times now. That will save you exponentially. But right here, this is the first gap we have. Keep in mind, if I had just beaten them in battle but not actually KO'd them, then they would have been pushed back for 5 seconds. That's not a huge window to really make my change. Now, these teams are astronomically weaker because they have 3 red medicines instead of a single blue medicine, which is kind of annoying here. It was in single-digit HP, and it restored its health fully. That's mildly annoying, but they can't fuse. Dark Elf has some pretty good attack strength, just based on how the card was designed, but, like, other than that, this team is pretty weak. And that's kind of a problem, is, like, they have you fight the weaker teams last, when realistically you would need to... I don't know, it's a weird feeling. Like, should you fight the stronger teams first so you get their polymerization activations out of the way, or should you fight the weaker teams first so you have a bit of time to see who gets whittled down and then plan your army accordingly? I don't know. It's kind of a weird dichotomy like that. Now right here I end up getting a bit of bad luck in the case that it was able to avoid paralysis, and it doesn't have to deal with too much nonsense otherwise. I can just wail on it to get rid of the last red medicine, and I won't have to worry about anything. Dark Elf also does have an ability there that you saw. It can take away some of the attack moves from a monster. That's mildly annoying, but I'm not going to lie, it feels like a bit of a waste with how high Dark Elf's inherent attack stat is. Because look at that, if I would be hit by that move repeatedly, some of my monsters could very easily go down. And it's really only because I realized they don't have any more attacks left this fight, I decide not to heal. Also, I kind of felt the dialogue was a bit inappropriate for the YouTube VOD just because I was talking with Punkerface and Samurai Tortoise so much. Not Samurai Tortoise, he was in a different stream, with Punkerface and Base Endymion so frequently. I will say shout out to Samurai Tortoise though, because he has helped me quite a bit. But yeah, you have such limited time to react there. I tried to tag Bones out so I could put Mokuba in point, and that didn't happen. Also, it's sunset right now in the battle. You see that in the backdrop, but sunset does not count as night in the context of this game, and that's kind of a problem. See, Bones' team right here gains a night power bonus. Even if you pick Kaiba's campaign first and they start at the weakest level, they are going to have a night power bonus. That's irritating because you are so close to having that power bonus, but the game does not give it to you. And, okay, obviously it would be kind of easy if they just naturally gave you a power bonus in what's supposed to be a pretty difficult mission, but that's the problem. This mission is too difficult, at least if you pick Kaiba's campaign first and you haven't optimized your item layouts. Remember, you can't buy items between missions, you buy them in the missions. So let's say you beat Emperor Heishin and you saved after that mission before this one, and you just don't have good equip items to work with. What are you going to do? Okay? Nothing. You have to just figure out a way to beat them by war of attrition, and if you're a kid, this is going to be one of the hardest missions for you. I'm not saying this game shouldn't be hard at times. I absolutely think it should, because, again, magic breaks the game. Status afflictions like paralysis, like what you're seeing here, they break the game. if I would use an appropriate amount of healing items, that would largely break the game. But the gap in difficulty between the Heishin mission and this mission right now is so astronomical for a kid that there's really no way you can know what to expect in this nonsense. And I got kind of lucky there in the case that Berfomet, the poison damage was enough to finish it off. It would have not only had an opportunity attack, but it would have gotten a chance to fight me. And for whatever reason, there's another officer coming from the main base way out over there who's going to appear way after all the other enemies do. I guess the idea is give you a bit of a break, but like, what's the point of a break when you've already beaten 5 out of the 6 marshals here? Or like 4 out of the 5 or whatever. You would think there should be a break after you're done like half of them, not almost all of them. Yeah, Mokuba finally gains a martial level here that matters. Unfortunately, it doesn't actually matter, and you'll see why very shortly. So, just for the sake of not wasting too much time, I do decide to send my marshals out here for the sake of getting this chapter finished. Now, when it hits 6 p.m., this is where things start to get interesting. Yugi suddenly appears, and he says he's willing to help you. What he does is he takes half the enemies and it permanently removes them from the chapter, meaning if they were still on the field by the time he gets there, then they're gone right then and there, and more importantly, they cannot respawn. Now, I don't think this would help at base, because, like, if they were still assaulting the castle, you've probably whittled through enough of their resources that they can't fuse anymore, and it's just a basic war of attrition. And I can sort of get that if you have beaten them, but you have very few marshals or monsters remaining, or you need to just fully heal for whatever reason, now they can't do that. They're stuck outside of the chapter from this point forward, and you really only have to worry about one monster combination that can fuse, and this team I'm fighting right now that can't fuse. That seems pretty simple and generous. I don't think that it's a bad idea to remove some of the monsters or some of the martial teams midway through the chapter. It's just that it's executed awkwardly here. It happens just too late to be legitimately helpful, but I don't know. Maybe my perception's a bit colored because I am doing this on New Game Plus. I feel like if I do start this Necrovalley challenge with Kaiba's campaign first, I might have a different perspective on it, and I will do that, I promise you. It's just a matter of getting to it. But yeah, here I am with 3 monsters who would all gain night power bonuses, and yet they don't have it because it's not night yet. To be fair though, I guess some of the opponent's monsters would gain night power bonuses as well, so maybe it's a good thing that's not happening. But it's weird, like, the game desperately wants this to be considered a night mission, because it's so easy for it to become night so quickly, and that just doesn't happen. Don't know why it doesn't happen, but it doesn't. Anyway, I will say that I got kind of lucky here in the sense that I didn't have to worry about any polymerizations happening, just because I was kind of lucky in how I got the critical hits and in how I was able to deal with the opponent monsters. Sure, I had some bad luck against these guys where Beast King of the Swamp was able to red medicine when it was in like single-digit HP. That's mildly irritating, sure, but it doesn't really ruin the chapter for you. Anyway, since it's not 7 yet, it still counts as sunset and not night. I do legitimately think this idea had a good amount of purpose behind it. I just wish that you had a little bit more time before the monsters started blitzing you, and then you could maybe cook up a more effective strategy regardless of what you were working with. So, Seeker is really no challenge here, not like he was a challenge in Yugi's campaign. I simply try to hit him with a gravity bind to reduce the number of moves he has available. Dungeon Worm is going to get a lot of hits on us, but its stat line isn't quite high enough for that to matter. And then It's a simple matter of just taking out the monsters as quickly as possible so that they don't do a whole lot more damage to me. Luckily, it doesn't seem like that's happening so far. I will say that when I do the Necrovalley challenge starting from Kaiba's campaign first, this is probably the mission I am dreading the most, if only because, like I said, you can go through the entire campaign up until this point without any real problems, and then this is going to act as a large wall. But we'll see what happens when we get there. So now with the mission over that eliminates our problem, in this cutscene we very clearly see that Scott, on his own, I'll wait for him to get on screen. Scott on his own is the one who kidnaps Mokuba here, but apparently, according to the later cutscenes, that's not actually what happens. Figure that one out, but I'm not going to bother.